47149, Jack!
Tell me something. What the hell is happening here?
It's flight number 19!
19 what?
It's that training mission from the Naval Air Station at Fort Lauderdale!
Who flies crates like these anymore?
No one! These planes were reported missing in 1945.
Flight 19, featured here in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, is possibly the most famous disappearance connected to the Bermuda Triangle. Some would argue it is the catalyst for the entire phenomenon. The story goes like this. On the 5th of December 1945, a squadron of 5 planes departed a naval air station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It was a routine navigation exercise that should not have posed a problem for these 14 experienced pilots and crewmen. Some 2 hours into the exercise, the squadron was supposed to be heading back when the pilot of the leading plane reported that he'd become disoriented as both his compasses were malfunctioning. Multiple stations maintained sporadic contact with Flight 19, attempting to determine their current location with little to no success. Communications between the 5 planes were also intercepted, and they could be heard arguing over directions and bearings. As the minutes passed, the signal between the towers and Flight 19 gradually weakened, and it became increasingly difficult to maintain a stable line of communication. Roughly 4 hours after takeoff, Navy personnel was able to approximate the flight's current location at some 200 kilometers north of their intended flight path. A flying boat with designation ST-49 was consequently dispatched to this location, but after a routine transmission, it inexplicably disappeared. 5 hours after takeoff, a final transmission was intercepted. It was simply a failed attempt by one plane to contact another, and Flight 19 was never seen or heard from again. It sure sounds mysterious, but I suspect the devil is not in the ocean, but in the details. The 5 planes were piloted by 4 students and 1 flight instructor named Charles Taylor. Upon departure, one of the students assumed the role of flight leader while Taylor merely acted as a supervisor. After turning north towards the island of Grand Bahama, Taylor believed the student to be guiding them in the wrong direction, so he assumed command of the flight. As you read the radio logs and testimonies by Navy personnel, it becomes evident that Taylor confused the islands in the Bahamas for the islands in the Florida Keys. He was heard saying, "Both my compasses are out and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I am over land but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down and I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale." In other words, he confused his actual position for this position. This may be hard to accept as Taylor was an experienced pilot, but then consider this. Taylor had previously been stationed as a flight instructor at the Naval Air Station in Miami, and training exercises launched from Miami took place over the Florida Keys. Prior to that, he'd been stationed at Key West in the Florida Keys. So it's entirely possible that Flight 19 was Taylor's first time flying this route over the Bahamas. Something that further supports this theory is that Taylor initially identified himself as MT-28, standing for Miami Torpedo Bomber 28. His correct ID was FT-28 for Fort Lauderdale. This growing confusion of what he knew from experience and what he saw outside his windows is likely why he came to distrust his instruments, as it's highly unlikely that both his compasses malfunctioned simultaneously. As Taylor thought he was in the Keys, he continued flying north in an attempt to reach land, but this had the opposite effect of taking them further out to sea. He was also disincentivized from turning west, as from Taylor's perspective, that would have taken them into the Gulf of Mexico. In reality, turning west would have saved their lives. Meanwhile, the weather was getting worse, the sun was setting, visibility was poor, and the sea grew increasingly violent. The logs reveal how truly desperate the situation became. At one point, Taylor informed his students, "Flying close formation, and when one plane drops to 10 gallons of gas, all planes will land together," suggesting that even in the event of a crash, they would remain as a group. He later continued, "I suggest we fly due east until we run out of gas. We have a better chance of being picked up close to shore." At this point, they're flying away from the coast, out towards the open ocean. Some of the last discernible messages reads, "Have to land on water unless landfall. We may have to ditch any minute." Then there's the flying boat ST-49. ST-49 was initially scheduled for a night navigation exercise when, upon getting a fix on the location of Flight 19, it was diverted into a search and rescue mission. After a routine departure transmission, it was never heard from again. But it was likely seen again. 23 minutes after ST-49 took off, a ship reported seeing a plane catch fire and explode upon impact with the ocean. The resulting inferno continued for several minutes, with flames rising some 30 meters above the ocean surface. Once the ship reached the location of the explosion, it found debris and a pool of oil, but no survivors. Yet another ship equipped with radar observed as a plane vanished from the screen at the exact same time the explosion was sighted. While an explosion is certainly surprising given that pre-flight checks revealed nothing of note, the plane had went aground due to a malfunctioning engine the day before. What exactly went aground entails is not elaborated upon, but it did warrant inspection of the plane's hull. Some Navy personnel immediately presumed the reported explosion was linked to the missing ST-49. Despite a systematic and week-long search involving tens of ships and hundreds of planes, nothing and no one was ever found. Though multiple planes and ships did report sightings of flares and various debris. All available evidence suggests that Flight 19 crashed into the ocean once they ran out of fuel, while ST-49 combusted and exploded, possibly due to a malfunctioning engine. The 6 planes and all 27 airmen aboard sank into the ocean, leaving no trace behind. But not every incident can be so thoroughly